Overnights in a warehouse, so I get home in the morning at all different times.
All right, we're gonna get started in a minute. If everybody wants to grab a coffee, either sandwich, what have you.
For here, it's whatever's the end. No.
I hope everyone had a good holiday. Happy New Year, all that fun stuff. This is our first Closing Cafe Chat 2025. Pretty good turnout, so thank you all for coming. A lot of new faces too, which is pretty exciting. It's great to get everybody from the real estate community, whether we work together or not, just in the same room to get a little bit of education. So it's exactly what the Closing Cafe Chat was set out to do, and it's very nice to see all the different faces here today. So today we have a pretty interesting topic, and I think it's going to be a good one. We have Bill Kehs of Kehs Stucco here.
Yep.
To talk about everything stucco. So, quick question: anybody ever use Mr. Kehs for their home or any of their clients' homes?
Lots of times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lots of hands up. Okay, very good. So I'm just going to let him steal the show and go from there. So Bill,
All right.
thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Happy New Year, everybody. So I guess a lot of you guys have sold stucco houses. Sometimes issues, sometimes not. Always a perceived issue, though, whether it's there or not. I set up the slideshow here so we can kind of go through, what stucco is, what inspections are, and the problems that we'll find, through the inspections. So, this is why we have stucco. Some super gorgeous houses that just can't get the look with anything else. There's houses like this one. This is actually an EFIS house. Anybody know what that is with the drive-it homes? Yeah. EFIS is like the whole industry. Drive-it's a manufacturer. So, but EFIS kind of got a bad rap a while back. Water's behind it, causing trouble. Mostly our problems are all flashing, whether it's stone veneer, brick veneer, whether it's EFIS or stucco. I'll show you throughout this process here what stops our water. Kick out flashings. This is where the roof would cover the bottom, the stucco would cover the side, and this pushes that water into the gutter. Fixes a lot of problems. Older school, if you're looking at your houses when you're selling them, you want to see this where gutters hit walls. That pushes that water from the roof into the gutter and not down the wall. Step flashings, they're good. These are pretty much always there. Roofers are not too bad with that. But the reason that's important, when you come down these walls with step flashings, what happens at the very last flashing? So all the water runs over every flashing until it hits the wall. That's where that's important, to push that out. And of course we have head flashings too. Same time water's in that wall, comes down, gets diverted out over the windows, the doors, the decks. Keeps that from getting messed up in there. Even houses like this, there's good places for stucco and there's not so good places for stucco. This one here, the house was actually in pretty decent shape. But as you can see, concrete decks, water's getting in the top of these. Actually, these pots on this house were part of the problem. They were holding water, they were mounted to this top, and water was getting in. That's all over masonry, so there wasn't any real rot problems there. But you'll see people like to put stucco by their steps as you walk up and down. Not a great place for stucco. Probably every house you see that has stucco there, probably chipped and broken. So I took a few pictures of some really nice houses, so why we do what we do anyway. So some of these you guys might recognize.
Do you have stucco on your own house?
I do. Stucco and stone veneer. So just on that topic, we bought this house last year. Actually had stucco and stone on it. Big overhangs, like 2-foot overhangs. We changed out a lot of windows, a lot of doors, all kinds of reconstruction. Everywhere we cut the stucco, it was like brand new. Those overhangs are everything.
What year was the house?
1977. And not a bit of rot anywhere, not a bit of rust. Everything was wonderful. I think products change. I think products back in the 70s were better.
Wow.
I think every year as you go on, we keep making changes to products because of, regulations, VOCs, whatever the problems might be, and they become less effective. So even our wire lath, I think it rusts easier today. I think there's less galvanizing on it.
What's the most common problem that you find with stucco? Or the most common, whether it just be like cracks inside of it, or do you run into? Just gonna say, I guess what's the most common stuff that you usually find that needs to be fixed, or that is a
Well, there's
bother?
two kinds of problems with stucco. The actual stucco, like what's wrong with the actual stucco? Is it cracking? Is it falling off? Is it bulging? Discolored? There's the texture wearing away, that kind of thing. Those are all stucco issues, mostly just cosmetic. The water issues are the bigger problem. So I would say those kick-out flashing diverters that are missing would be the one thing that creates the most damage. And that can come in, they can be bad enough to come inside and ruin the floors and everything else.
Do you typically tend to find problems more at lower points on the house or higher points on the house? Is that
Lower points. You can have an upper window that's got a problem. You won't really see it until it gets to the lower window. It needs place. It can run down the wall inside, never really notice it until it has the opportunity to get out, and that lower window would be that opportunity. You'll see a lot of times inside your houses, if you have a stucco house and you're able to walk around the inside, if you look at the headers on those lower windows, sometimes you're going to see little brown circles. Those little brown circles is water that has dripped through, dried up, and that brown is what's left over from like the plywood rotting. Not really enough to been noticed, like not a puddle on the floor, just drips, but that's enough. Can you tell that's real stone or veneer stone? It is veneer. The problem on this building, they have a nice siding up top. The band across this house is metal. Metal comes across. They have joints in the metal. Guess where the house rotted? Right there. So again, stone veneer is a bad product. It's not. Flashings are bad. When they put this together, it should have been done a lot better. Stone veneer is stucco. So when you guys look at these houses, everything underneath the stone is everything that's underneath stucco. It's paper, it's wire, it's scratch. Whether you put a stucco finish on it or you actually stick stone, put a stone finish on it, there's really no difference. In fact,
I have a question for you, because I know you've done several stucco inspections for my clients.
yes.
So I never ever thought about getting an inspection on stone veneer. So how would you know it was compromised just by looking at it, or what do you know? And how do you know? What testing do you do?
So it's a little tough to tell from the outside.
Gotcha.
If you have no other clues, you don't have those little drips on the inside, you don't have any bulging walls. But if you do have a wall like this and you're looking at pretty good sized cracks, from the windows,
Oh,
pretty,
cracks in
pretty,
the windows. Gotcha.
and the cracks are there because when the plywood gets wet, it swells up a little bit. When it swells up, it pushes on the stone, and of course when it rots and it goes away, but you end up the cracks stay. So there's that. Without actually testing it, you don't know for sure. Maybe it's a football size problem, maybe it's a problem from this window all the way to the ground.
So if I remember correctly, when you do a stucco inspection, it's a small drill
Yes.
into the stucco.
Yep.
And then, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me.
And forgive me for making you skip ahead. I can wait.
Try to make it forget. All right, I'll show you when we get to that one.
Yeah, I can wait, yeah.
All right, so what do we got here? This house actually has a real stone veneer, but it's still veneer, so it's still stucco. The stone is real, it's cut thin, it's adhered to the stucco.
So is what makes it stucco just the process, or what is behind it basically that's adhering it to the
Yeah, so
structure?
the vapor barrier, the wire, and the scratch coat. That's the start of every one of these.
Never would have thought to look at it that way for the stone or the veneer or any of those, that it's the same as
Yep.
stucco, but it makes sense.
Yep. So again, if the flashings are good, the wall is going to be good. So
Is it safe to say then that if you see any points that are like repointed, like repaired, that maybe you should have it inspected further?
yeah, I'll show you. I mean, a little farther too, where not all repairs are good.
Right.
We've been back to many houses to take them apart and say, this was already fixed before. The plywood's not the same, the vapor barrier's not the same. But again, what usually we find is they fix the rot, they fix the stucco, they put it back together, but it's still bad because they never fixed the actual problem. So I actually have a report to put up here to show you too. So this is one of those areas where you would see, the kick-out flashings are in here. Sometimes that water runs down, shoots into the gutter. They have a lot of codes today, mostly to try and combat these problems that we have. A lot of the codes aren't, in my view, they're not great. There's a lot of things that we're doing that don't seem to help. Flashings are everything. If they could just focus the codes on flashings and making sure all that is good, we're good. If you're looking at selling a newer home, it probably will have like what they call rain screen behind the stucco. So it's an air space. And air makes things dry, everything's great, it makes you feel good. In my view, that doesn't really work, because where that rain screen is not where our problems are. Our problems are from that vapor barrier to the plywood, which if the water got back there, that rain screen doesn't help us with that. It doesn't, it sounds like water can run out the back and drip out the bottom. That's one of our new codes too, is weep screens so that the water can drip out. Doesn't really need to drip out. It's one of the things I always tell you is if you have a glass of water and a pitcher of water, so you have a stucco wall, you can take that rainstorm or that pitcher, just dump it into the glass. The glass never gets fuller. You dump all the pitcher of water into there. Same with the wall. It can get saturated in a storm. It doesn't get any more saturated. Once it's full of water, it's full of water. When it stops raining, it goes back out the way it came in. So this also you see we have a few buckles in the wall. On this particular one, it was really just a stucco issue, not a water issue on this one. But this house had been previously repaired. This trim was put there to hide the patch. So we didn't know any of that until we got there to take it apart. See the white on the stones down beneath here? That's efflorescence. You'll see a lot more in the spring than any other time. Kind of comes and goes. It's like powder. But that's because water getting into the stone itself and coming out brings that mineral out. That's something that, as homeowners, is a good idea to waterproof that. Because the more that happens, the more the face of the stones start to kind of crumble off and go away. That's the other house with the big buckles. Woodpeckers. So that's actually a piece of 5-pon. Lot of window heads, dental molding, birds like that, but they also like the ephes work too. But when you get that, you also get water into those holes. You'll see a lot of folks cut through that's another ephes system, the styrofoam. They'll cut through and not seal it. Definitely should be sealed. So as we're we're doing the inspections, we pick all these little things out. Would that last one, would that actually mean anything? Probably not. We're down on the bottom. You don't see that. It must cause much of an issue, but it should still be sealed. Keeps out the wind and the bugs and everything else. Once woodpeckers do their thing, other birds like to come in and move in. They kick out a bunch of styrofoam, and they can actually travel inside these walls for 3, 4, 5 feet, and they lay their eggs down in there. So, rusty wire. That's what I was saying. I think products today aren't as good as they used to be. This house is about 15 years old, and for no real reason on this home, section of it just rusted away. So, once we tore it apart, we got to go, maybe 5 feet by 5 feet, and the wire was good again. Wasn't any areas for extra water, nothing like that. So.
Then you have to repaint the whole side of the house then, right?
Yeah, well, it's become a cosmetic thing. I like to tell people, these are big, beautiful, expensive houses, so just patching them, really not fair. You should. There's 3 things to a patch when you're doing things like stucco. There's the color. If you're going to paint it, then you fix that problem. There's the texture, and then a product like this is one of the EFIS products. You can buy that texture in a bucket, so also not really a problem. Then you get to this, what we call a halo on the outside edge of that patch, where the new material is kind of filling in the texture of the old material. So even if you paint it, that halo kind of stays. So we prefer just to refinish that wall and not see any of that. You get some really bad ones. This was like not flashed at all in this home. There's nothing in here. The plywood's completely gone. It's just one big open cavity once the stone came off of there.
How often, like for instance, some of these homes are older, but the newer homes where they start running into problems, how often is the builder going to stand by their workmanship?
Well, technically, they should be standing by it for up to 12 years.
Okay.
It's kind of a fight at that point, I think.
Okay.
But when it comes to rot, which then becomes structural, and structural problems are actually the responsibility of the builder for up to 12 years. So, but actually making that all work.
And when do you start seeing problems like this? How far out?
Oh, you can see them almost immediately.
Okay.
A lot of times people say, hey, I've been in my house for 5 years and it just started to leak. And the reality is it probably started to leak day one. But it took 5 years to work itself a trail to where it could actually show up on the inside. We had a house in Philadelphia that 5 months after they moved in, they already pulled the drywall off. And we went down to look at this, and the stucco was done as 100% the coat as you can get. These houses have flat roofs you can kind of party on, and these big parapet walls. The connection between the parapet wall and the stucco wall, water was allowed to get in there and followed it down and just kind of went everywhere. And just poor design. That's where that flashing goes, so you can prevent that from happening. Those are the test holes. So the hole side by side, the meter goes in, it reads, you have 3 types of readings. Dry, anything. The reports are a little specific, but 14 and down is great. 15 to 20 is just questionable. Could be better. If it stayed that way, it'd be fine. Plywood Association says plywood's not going to rot unless it's 20% or higher.
Does
So.
this particular property have a pest problem of some sort? 'Cause I see ants
Yeah,
going
yeah.
out the holes there.
Yeah, that's what we get. We get ants.
Ants or termites or something.
Yep.
They are, but
So there's a reading in the stone veneer. That's what these probes look like. So 33 is too high. That's something you have to look into. You can almost where we drill is because of where we know these problems are. So we already know the issue once we've drilled there and found the water. Okay, that's what's got to happen. A lot of the windows got to come out. Windows are put in wrong, and the only way to flash them right is to take them out and do them again. So. You know, 20% readings are tough for me. If you were to tear it apart, you wouldn't see anything wrong with this wall yet. So you're like, well, why did we bother tearing it apart? So it depends if you already own the house, you can just maybe caulking. I don't like caulking in particular, but this house doesn't have any caulking around the window. Looks like it has something to the side, but whatever they're missing at the bottom. So maybe caulking would help. That way you can kind of just sit on it for 5 years and check it again. Sit on it for 5 more years and check it again. Maybe it never changes, maybe it goes down. But if you are the buyer, then that's a little bit of a different story. You don't want that gamble. And the seller already owns it.
Yeah.
Buyer doesn't want to buy it. So in that case, yeah, open it up and change it.
Is there an easy way to tell the difference between veneer and real?
Yeah, I guess your biggest differences will be if you have look at your windows. So veneer stone is going to be about flush with the window, maybe just a little bit farther out. Real stone is still actually a veneer with the newer houses. You know, it's there's a ledge built for it. It can be 4 inches thick or 6 inches thick, so that definitely sticks out farther than than the windows do. So you can kind of tell.
So if it's real stone, it's more flush, is what you're saying?
No, it's thicker. It comes out farther than that. Yeah.
Further. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's dry up or spread out and go away. What the stucco and the stone do is it does push things flat, kind of holds water. Like I said, Hurricane Sandy came through and put a shot glass of water somewhere it shouldn't have been. You know, it caused rot, and then we did a test, and it was dry but rotted. You know, that's because a little bit of water got somewhere.
I just have a follow-up. It seems to me as though stucco originated in arid conditions and would be wonderful in low humidity situations. But because you had just said that we see problems in a variety of different
Yeah.
styles of home, is there anything that you could kind of offer to allay the anxiety of a buyer saying, hey, I really like this stucco home, but I've always heard that moisture is a problem.
The inspection is the answer to that.
Okay.
You know, you go in there as this unknown. Oh my God, how bad could it be? You know, and you find out it's perfect. You know, where you find out that it's all got to come off and start over. Like a lot of times, the one that you can't fix with stucco, right, is the perception that a lot of people have. It's stucco, it's bad. And so, in a sense, if the house is really bad and you can negotiate, all right, take all the stucco off and put something else back on, right? So that way when your client goes to sell that house, they don't have the same conversation about stucco, you know? So not to say that there's might be a rot problem behind that too, but the funny thing is in real estate, we don't check the brick homes. We don't check the siding homes, you know, and the more we check, the more we find. You know, it's like, do I have cancer? Let's go to the doctor. Yep, you got it. I wouldn't have known if I wouldn't have went, you know? Kind of how the houses are. So we have a lot of houses that would change, you know. They tend to keep the stone veneer because of the look, you know. To change the whole front of a house to siding that really shouldn't be siding doesn't give you the look that you want.
Bill, with elevated moisture levels that you feel uncomfortable with, wouldn't that encourage like ants or termites?
Yeah, that's why the ants are calling out of that hole. Ants and termites love wet wood. They thrive in that. And there'll be a couple pictures of that too.
So EFIS post 1998, when they have the drainage boards behind them, what issues are you finding with that, and how does it differ from the way stucco works in the drainage?
It doesn't really differ a lot, and the drainage again is one of those things that's a feel-good thing. So they're kind of, when you create this drainage, you're kind of giving up on the fact that you can keep the water out. I think, heck with it. Let's let it get back there and run through. But the problem with the EFIS is when that product is sold as an insulation, right? Well, now we just put all these grooves behind there where air can flow. So no longer is it an insulation product. It has work, just goes right through that. And the same thing I said about the rain screen, the water that's by the foam and the vapor barrier, which is where that groove is going to go, that's not the water that's our problem. The water that's our problem is that leaked in by the window, which the grooves in the foam don't help us. You know, so again, flashing.
Do they still make the EFIS with the drainage?
Yeah,
Oh, they do.
yeah. It's really used heavily in commercial. You know, I think it's good for a house too. You know, again, just if we build houses for the product and we prepare them, you know, for that, it's good. But when you just try to slap something up real quick on a wall, you know, and they overlook all these little details, it's a problem. So I think Victor's house was great. We didn't do an inspection prior. We checked it afterwards, and all EFIS, except for the chimneys. I have a picture of that in here too. So the chimneys weren't capped right. Water got in there, and you know, caused some damage to the plywood there. But the rest of it was great. So
What year was that from?
98.
Oh, perfect.
yeah.
So was mine. I was asking because mine was 98 too, when they started the drainage boards.
Yeah. So the drainage board, again, I really think that a lot of stuff is feel-good stuff. You know, when you talk about insects and things and you talk about the drainage and you talk about the little weep holes all left in the bottom, you know, insects tend to like those things too. You know, I don't know if one's better than the other, honestly. I think they're about the same because, again, flashings. If the flashings are right, the water will be out.
So I have a house stuff I'll be putting up for sale. A lot of it's all stucco, but I do see cracks, like hairline little cracks.
Mhm.
Besides, like seeing the obvious, you know, wave or the rust spots, is there any other way to tell if there's an issue besides just a little hairline crack?
Now, so what I'll tell you is not all cracks are created equal, right? So hairline cracks probably happened that first season or two once that stucco was done. The house, a new house, you know, it's still moving, still settling in. Little hairline cracks can happen. Mostly it's just cosmetic in that sense. You can have cracks that have little stains coming out of the cracks. That's a water problem somewhere. You know, it's using the crack as its way out. You could have buckles in the wall where the wall's pushed, and that's why we have cracks. Another big problem. You know, if you have a client that's really what I call crackophobic, you know, I got a couple of small cracks, have a big problem. There are paints out there that are stretchy that can bridge those little cracks, waterproof the wall. I'll show you one in here with that too. So what do we got? So that drill is right in the corner of a house where there should be 2x4s, but there wasn't. Once you got through the mortar, there was nothing. So above this was another one of those kick-out flashing situations where water had gotten in. And that's when you really get into the structural stuff. You know, just one corner rotting is not too bad. You have a lot of other 2x4s holding things up. But sometimes it comes down and spreads across. We had a house where the sliding doors would no longer slide because enough studs rotted to actually settle that down.
Are you saying there
So.
was no 2x4s at all, or no 2x4s any longer?
Any longer.
Any longer.
Yeah, they were there originally,
That's-
but they're not there anymore.
I mean, you never know who did the work, so.
Yep. Yep. So when you get into the framing problems like that, you know, a typical repair wouldn't require us to take the studs out because there's drywall nailed to them on the inside. So unless you want to get into, you know, an interior renovation along with the exterior renovation, we just usually put new studs next to them on the inside of the wall cavity and go that route. That's what some plywood looks like behind stucco when the water's gotten there. It's like wood mulch.
I was just gonna say, so when you get mulch coming out of a hole,
Yes.
that's the first bad sign.
Yep. So I won't do that hole until I've pre-drilled, found out that it was soft. Instead of just saying, hey, I drilled it, it was rotted, yada, 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 right? So I do that much more convincing to show that rather than just say it. That was a core that didn't look too bad.
These are all
Black.
pictures of stucco, right, not EFIS?
Yeah, these so far are all stucco. So there's different. You guys all seen stucco with the heavier texture. You know, that's an actual cementitious stucco. There is some called a sand finish or a float finish stucco, which is just stucco. These houses are what we call hard coat. So it's kind of a combination between stucco and EFIS. It's got the EFIS finish over top of the stucco product. Since nothing's perfect, right? You have stucco is very hard, but it cracks. EFIS is very soft, but it doesn't crack. So we take the EFIS products and put them on top of the stucco products, depending if we want something, so hard that it can't be penetrated. Kids with bicycle handlebars, lawnmowers shooting out rocks can easily puncture an EFIS wall, and woodpeckers, of course. There's no rot inside. That's your typical stucco kind of a texture. So at one point they had caulking around the windows, but you can see that's ancient. Don't think it helped anyway, or it would have helped even if it were still good. So, and once you drilled the 2 little holes and you found the dirt, and then you did the core and showed what the dirt looked like, and you take the stucco off, that's what we see. There's an awful lot of damage like that. Yeah, and that's the fear. That's why when someone's, I love stucco, but I've seen this. It's like, I don't want no part of that. So if after, the deal's made and they allow the inspection to happen and they allow the repairs to happen, again, changing this to something else, some kind of a siding. There's some really high-end sidings out there that look beautiful in these high-end houses. It's kind of tough to do it on the front wall, though, when it's designed for something else that you can kind of tell. But this one had that Tyvek wrap as its vapor barrier, and that's not a wrap that's supposed to be there. In fact, I'll show you another picture where they actually they have Tyvek made a wrap for stucco, which was a complete failure. So this was an EFIS house, and the guy swore his house was 100% perfect. Did no need for the inspection. It's fantastic, and it was, except for this one window. What happens on these houses, or these windows, these screws are the screws that hold the mechanism that you crank the window out. It's kind of like a firefighter trying to find where the fire started. You fall back to the toaster in the kitchen. Well, you can see the end of that window is great, and it got real bad as you got to the screws. So you know where that came from. And that, through screw holes, when the screws were still in them, created rot down this gentleman's wall. A little tough to figure out how the water got past the weather stripping of that window, but it must have been getting in the top and the weather stripping holding it in the bottom until it dripped through. But that's, if this house would have had a sill flashing beneath this window, they still would have had a window problem, but they would not have had a wall problem. So again, flashings. We let this window destroy this house because we didn't flash it like we should have. So, more rot. Sometimes whole walls. Not all the water comes from the outside. We've had walls with no windows in that were completely rotted. Put in a beautiful shower with body jets, but for some reason the body jets didn't work. But they did work, but they just worked inside the wall. So we got called there. We thought it was just a small problem. We followed all the way up the wall to this back of the bathroom. Yeah, and that's what happens. That's the Tyvek stucco wrap, which wasn't even good in theory. I'm not sure why they ever did that. They created wrinkles in the paper, exactly the same paper, that's the house wrap that's supposed to keep the house dry. So Tyvek came up with it. Hey, let's wrinkle it, and it'll create those little channels for water to run. But when you pushed your cement through the wire lath, you filled all of those, and you flattened out the paper. So I don't know what they thought they were going to accomplish with that, but they accomplished nothing. Probably lawsuits is all they accomplished. This leak is actually between two windows. Windows are put together, there's something called a mullion in there. Again, if this window would have been flash in place, that problem doesn't happen. So that's what we look for when we come out with the inspections. We come out looking for, what did this builder do? Did they? And the builders like to put it onto their subs, but it's always the builder. You paid this man to either you paid him to flash this hole, or you didn't pay him to flash the hole. But one way or the other, you paid him and he moved on. So if you paid him to do it, and you didn't do it, that's on the builder. And if you didn't ask him to do it, that's still on the builder. So there's a lot of framing rot. And this is sometimes the rot's not that bad. I drill a hole and I only hit this one little quarter-sized piece of rot, and you open up the wall and that's all that it was. Sometimes it goes, like you see, all the way to the ground. There's always a question between, this is called OSB, sheathing, compared to regular plywood. Plywood's better. Both are fine if you don't let them get wet. And both fail if they do get wet. Plywood takes longer to fail. But once you're leaking, that's your problem. You already got a problem. So those little guys, they like wet wood. So sometimes the rot is bad, and then sometimes the insect problem is even worse. So it's pretty common actually to drill holes and in areas that I know are wet and to have ants come out.
How often is it ants versus termites? Or that you could tell?
Termites, up until last year, thousands of houses, never seen termites. No. One of the codes for stucco and stone veneer is that we terminate it at least 4 inches above grade. And the idea is, I guess they talk to the termites. Termites don't want to climb up that 4 inches.
Gotcha.
They'll be exposed and they get eaten by bugs or birds or whatever. So the house that had the termites in actually had a termite inspection. No termites. So this house was empty, and we went with the homeowner to discuss a few things. And we went inside, and there were termites everywhere. And called the termite guy and says, well, they're called swarmers. They just show up from the yard. They work their way in. So he assured her there was no termite problem. But there was definitely a big termite problem. Even ate through the wooden floors, the hardwood floors. Architecture.
Have you ever encountered a problem so big or anything where you would say, okay, this stucco is just not for this house, you better reside it with something else? Like, have you ever encountered something that is past a certain threshold?
No, again, you go back to flashings, In fact, stucco is easier to flash. We have some houses that have flat roofs. It's actually easier to stucco those than to put siding on them. Those houses look more modern. Siding doesn't quite go with that, that beautiful flat stucco does. So these balconies over top of bay windows, people love them. We all love these houses that are, peaks and valleys and ridges and all kinds of fancy things. And the more difficult it looks, the more we like it. But the more problems we get. You want to build a really good house that lasts you forever. Build a nice square box with a big overhang, and it'll last forever. I bet your windows would last forever too. So, but yeah, these just create problems. So that's one of the areas where the flashings go. You know, it just water gets in, it just runs all the way down. Usually when they're that bad, you know inside. You can smell it. The hardwood floors buckle. Because when it gets to the floor, if you picture how a house is built, the floor is built first, the walls are built onto it. So when the wall is leaking, it comes down and actually hits the floor. It'll always rot the flooring, but how far in it goes, it depends on how bad that it is. This is one where meter boxes are always bad. Oh, sorry about that. With this one, you can see this glue. That's a styrofoam house, an EFIS house, that was attached right to the sheathing. That was never a great idea. That was back in the late 80s, early 90s when it was just glue it to the plywood, everything will be fine. And that was not the case. That's when drivers started to get a bad rap, and that actually was their fault. There's more rot. You can see the corners of the windows. If you notice that they don't really rot too much right under the middle of the window. It's always the corners. And of course, the framing is when it gets. What I do an inspection report on that, I'll drill in there, and my drill bit's just going to sink in real far. So we know that not only is the sheathing bad, we also know the studs are bad, and pretty accurately actually. The equipment, and how we do it, we're pretty much right on the money with how these houses are. They pretty much are the way we say they're going to be when we open them up. So I'll stay on that one for a second. Anderson windows. The 200 series, if you have them, you probably have a problem. So you can, even as a realtor, you can walk around the house and kind of just squeeze this to see if there's any wood still in there. A lot of times there's no wood. The sills are actually open. You can squeeze those too and see if there's any wood in those. And a lot of times the wood's gone. Usually on the north side of the house where things can't dry as quickly. So you got, that sits on the floor. That's the floor joist. That's where we get into some pretty heavy, structural damage. So that and that. So I drilled a hole in the wall to get that. So this is not actually on the main house, but this is a big patio that was built out, and you can kind of see underneath the patio there. The stucco was the only thing holding that water in there, which is one reason why I say why stucco houses have a bit more of an issue than the siding houses. That was all siding, would have just ran out before. So
you drilled that hole and all that water came out of it?
5 minutes.
Wow.
5 minutes of water came out of that hole.
Unheard of.
Yep. Yeah. And we saw the rust on the ground from dripping out of these corners. It was dripping down there. So we knew there was water. We knew it was dripping, but didn't expect, pretty much.
So usually, you said, I know you still hold at all different points and stuff that you're doing, or depending on the area of it or whatever, but usually you said you're down low. Like this one's obviously up high.
Mm-hmm.
You have also drilled down low or not? Because
Well, this didn't have a down low.
Okay.
Here's your column. That's all cement column. This is all solid concrete.
Behind it, gotcha.
This is concrete too, but this was frame.
Okay. So
And
you
it-
usually just look for where it's framed is where you're drilling the hole. I mean, obviously you're not
Yeah.
drilling for concrete, but.
Concrete can get wet. There's no issues with that. So if you have a house that's older houses like Bethlehem, Allentown kind of houses, in town, you're going to have stucco on those houses too. You're not going to have these problems. Is the stucco broken? Is it cracked? Is it falling off? Yeah, that's truly a stucco problem. A lot of times the stucco comes off on those houses because the bricks are deteriorating where the stucco is attached to. A lot of those houses actually look like brick, but it's called brick coat, so it's basically stucco over top of brick. And then that product is falling off these days as well. You stuck it to a sandy brick, and now it's just not hanging on there anymore.
So, Bill, tell me, because you just did 28th Street for my client last month.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember, but it was a small repair to the stucco, but I wanted to get an offer with no inspection, so I had to come out.
Right.
Before I put the house for sale. So, like, it seemed like just a small, like, break in, like, it's a regular stucco wall with a small hole.
Right.
But that's, like, tell us more about that, because that's a pretty normal repair. I see it all the time, but I don't know, like.
Yeah, I couldn't quite
why.
remember that one, but it sounds like it's just a stucco
Yeah.
problem, not a water problem, not a flashing problem, just a stucco problem.
Okay.
So yeah, that happens. That's not real common actually. There's people backing into the wall with their cars or whatever. Stucco actually is a pretty durable product. We've had houses that had it on for 100 years and it still looks good. Weather's a big deal. A lot of guys are putting stucco on in weather that's not right, and they'll put antifreeze in the stucco so it doesn't freeze, and that ends up causing corrosion on the wire, and the wire rusts and things happen. A couple of those pictures had the buckles in the wall. There's a couple reasons that those walls can buckle. One, either the wire rusted off the nails and that's kind of just hanging there, or maybe the plywood rotted away and the nails are now just hanging there. They have nothing to hold on to anymore. Those are two of the big ones. Or the other one would be poorly installed. It didn't have enough nails and it started to come off. So that doesn't usually happen too often. Zip system is a relatively new. It's still OSB board. It's got a waterproof face on it. They don't really allow you to stucco directly over that. In this case, it's another bathroom issue. The water on the inside, tried to get outside. Inspection was done, didn't pass. You open it up and try to find out what's going on. You figure it's probably this window, when you first start, and you open it up and say, nope, not the window. Then you go and you can see the backside of all the plumbing in there, and you see that was cleaned up and fixed at some point. So one of the other problems with houses, which is a problem for the house and not really stucco related, is when the grades are too high. So this one here, you can see the grade is really close. Landscapers come in and they don't really know where the stucco or the foundation starts and the wood stops, so they keep stacking up the wood mulch, and sooner or later you get too high. And any wood buried beneath anything is going to be wet. So even this system here, if water gets in around windows, this zip board, when you cut it, anywhere you cut it, you've exposed the edges and water gets in those edges. So even though it sounds like a good deal, still not perfect. That's the same wall. Mold is something a lot of our clients really worry about. It's stucco, it's mold, it's, kids are allergic to mold. Out of 100 houses, you're going to find that once or twice. Because mold needs three things to grow. It needs wet, which if you have a leak, you have wet. It needs dark, which inside the wall cavity is obviously dark. But the next thing it needs is that constant temperature. So the reason that is on the drywall is because we have a constant temperature between the insulation and the drywall. We don't have a constant temperature between the insulation and the sheathing. So it doesn't really grow in the sheathing. It has to actually get past the insulation to start causing that. And by that time, I think people know a lot more, because you're going to have peeling paint, you're going to have buckling floors, trim that's separating from the wall. That's when the problems are a little bit bigger. When you have those things, you start thinking a bit more about maybe having mold. But a lot of people's noses are really good too, and they can just walk in a room and say, yep, that's moldy. That was a stone veneer one that just did not stay attached to the house. Pulled away a long time ago. Birds were in there for a while. You can see the wire lath is completely rusted away. I guess on this one the wire failed. Perhaps this one was done in the wintertime, and that, kind of hard to go back 15, 20 years to see what the actual issue was. But the wire didn't hold, pulled off the nails, and The heavy stone's just kind of hanging there. So that's where framing's supposed to be. You know, this is the bottom of the wall. That used to be a big beam going through there and no longer there. So, recognize that picture, Victor? Yeah. So, that's Victor's chimney. When they did this house, they cared a bit more about how it looked and not quite as much as how it was going to work. So that cap they have on top there, it doesn't come over. So the water just goes under, goes behind everything and causes that problem. So again, the cap is a flashing. So if it's a flashing's not right, that's what we end up with. So previous repairs. So we open up these houses that have an issue. They paid somebody that didn't know what they were doing to come in and try to fix it. We know it's been repaired. They got new drywall on the bottom. They painted the studs to, I don't know why they do that. I guess they're trying to keep the smell down. So they fixed the rut. They fixed the wet drywall. They fixed the plywood. They fixed everything, but they didn't stop the reason that it happened. This particular house had a big, beautiful deck across the top. And the flashing was, I got to call it fake. It was there, but it was put in after the fact, just so you could look at it and say, oh, it's flashed. But it never went up behind the stucco above. So that came off the stucco right behind the metal, caused rot all the way down. And that one too was actually buried into the ground. That's what those repairs look like once you take that rod out, put the flashings in. There's a bit of a debate on whether you tear off entire walls when you have a problem or do repairs in just what's bad. I tend to push this way more because no matter if you have a full stucco house, there is no end to the wire. There's an inside corner, which would have to be just like this inside corner, and there's outside corners, which would have to be just like this. So I would say, what's the bang for your buck? Do you want to spend the money to tear off an entire elevation, you know, just to say that you did, or repair them like that? Now the new vapor barrier gets tucked in underneath all these edges. The wire gets folded on, so you have no cracks and you have no water getting in. Down in Bucks County, lower Bucks County mainly, they're doing full tear-offs all the time. And you drive by them and they're all in plywood, and there's a couple spots this big that were rotted. But down there they've been very good at really scaring people about the whole, oh my God, it's stucco, it's got to go. You know, if I told you all the things that the average stucco house doesn't have compared to what today's code is, you'd be like, well, how would anybody ever stucco it like that? You know, the old stucco was a half-inch thick with one layer of paper and no expansion joints and no caulking and no kick-out flashings and any of these things. No weep screed, no rain screen. But still throwing all these things in there, all these houses I just showed you, most of them have all those things. So the answers that they're coming up with are not good answers. They think, I don't know who makes the rules, but they're not working.
The majority of problems would you find, or that you're replacing jobs for customers, would you find it's typically covered by homeowners insurance, or is this something where you're usually paying out of pocket?
Mostly out of pocket. We had a big development in New Jersey where every house was identical. Every problem was identical. The first lady was a very strong lady, very strong talker. Somehow she was able to get her insurance company to cover everything. Even painting the entire house so it matched. Kind of like painting your car, right? Nobody else in the development, 15 more houses, nobody else got any coverage at all.
Well, I want to know what her insurance company
So, well, I tell you, for people who are just buying houses, your Geicos, your State Farms, those people don't do anything, right? Amica and farmers, and there's a few others that really do cater to their client. I think their clientele is a wealthier clientele. You know, they don't mind paying a bigger premium. But
Of what you've come across, is there usually, if there are occasions where you've seen an insurance company cover and that's who's paying you or writing the check, you know, you
Yep.
obviously you're gonna be probably aware of it, but is there a certain problem source or something particular that's like a common thread amongst the ones that you have seen covered?
well, I know the ones that don't get covered is because this is not a one-time occurrence, and we don't cover rot. You know, and I like to argue with them and say, well, the hole only happened once. Water.
Is it
Cover cause
typ-
of loss in order for an insurance company to pay.
Yeah.
So, and there's so many, I was in insurance for 30 years, I would never heard of them for any of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever hear of Stucco riders that you can get on your policy?
Yeah.
There are those. So if you are buying a big, fancy stucco house and your insurance company offers a stucco rider, that would be,
Shop around
Shop
for one that
insurance.
does, that
Yeah.
can offer it, you know?
if you can afford that giant house, you can probably afford that insurance, and I'm sure it wouldn't cost that much for
Yeah,
that.
there's a couple insurance companies.
So just,
I mean-
just for peace of mind.
I can just imagine, it obviously depends on the size of the house, but if you have to re-side an entire house, whether it's with, you know, redoing the stucco or just going, I'm going with new stuff, can't do this, you know.
Well, I'll give you, in case your clients ask you this, your typical 5,000 square foot all stucco house, probably around $200,000.
Wow.
You know, because if you can kind of picture when this house was done originally, it's in the dirt, it's new. New is easy because there's nothing in the way, right?
Yeah.
House about 5,000 square feet, probably in the $80,000 line for brand new stucco. So now you are tearing it off, fixing the rot, dealing with the blacktop driveways and the fancy plants and all that. When you're putting it back on, you are doing it up to today's code compared to what it was before. So yeah, they get to be quite expensive.
So if you are a homeowner without the extra, like, money laying around, you might be stuck in your house for a
Well,
long time.
that was actually happening back when '08, when the housing market kind of crashed out and people with a little bit of money were buying houses that they probably wouldn't have bought otherwise. We're getting caught in that. They're getting caught with giant roofs to redo and giant stucco problems to redo, and that they couldn't afford to do them. So it's buying something they shouldn't have.
Have you ever handled stucco in Pennsylvania, or have you done stucco stuff in other states? I used to live
Just-
in Arizona. In Arizona, everything's stucco. So here to me,
Yeah,
I
so
see it,
just
I'm
Jersey.
Like, ah. But I'm just curious if maybe different areas have, if it's always just moisture-related problems for the most part, or do you see different things like in Pennsylvania where you might, you know.
Well,
you
the weather
friends
had-
from other states that maybe have stories or thoughts, or you know, I'm just curious if there's like
I guess the more rain we get, the more problems we get. So yeah, go to Arizona where it doesn't rain so much.
water-related.
Yeah. So Florida's a good one to look at. They build almost like identical looking buildings, but some of them are all masonry with stucco on them. And some of them are all frame with stucco on them. But you know, they get heavy rains down there too, and they get the same problems that we get here as far as
Just the heat.
water getting in. Flash it, flash it, flash it.
Flashing, flashing, flashing.
That's right. So, yes.
Are there any issues with stucco that flashing can't prevent?
So the stucco issues are something separate than water issues. So the flashings can fix all the water issues. Now, can stucco have its own problems and just be a stucco problem? Definitely.
When you say a stucco problem, is that
So,
somebody backs a car up into the wall or?
yeah, that's a little bit, that's kind of just accidental stuff. But yeah, I mean, it can get old. Perhaps, like I said, something was in the mix when they did the scratch coat and decided to fail. We've had houses where the coat underneath was really soft, and you could actually like pull the finish off the outside. So there's that, I would say applicator error with things like that. You really couldn't see that, you couldn't tell. The problem with a lot of the track houses, they are picking the cheapest guy, and that is the only criteria for those builders. Is we were in that for a while until I figured out that working for those builders was a competition for the bottom. How cheap could you do it and still stay alive? So we needed to get away from that. So.
Okay, so the majority of problems you see, probably it's safe to say they're water related, which is really flashing related, not stucco
Yep.
related. And the stucco problems you see, like, and I'm still wrapping my brain around dry bit, aphis, whatever, like, oh, stucco is stucco, I'm just, high overview, I'm not gonna get it, but do you find you come across more issues with one product or one version versus another, like more stucco versus the stone veneer stucco, like do you find, yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't even know if I still.
Yeah.
fully
So
grasp that.
so the ephus has the issues that the birds, the woodpeckers for the ephus,
Oh, yeah.
that you won't get that in stucco.
Okay.
You know, and if you're not really concerned about hairline cracks, you know, the stucco's good. If you really don't like the hairline cracks, ephus is better. There are ways to make ephus stronger. You can't even put a hammer through it. Of course, those extra layers of protection are expensive. So.
Can you show us, because I don't know if the house on Marcel is actually stucco, because the one you showed us, it was very more like layered looking and rough, and the one I'm selling with the hairline cracks perhaps is very smooth, grainy but very smooth.
I was just gonna say too, yeah, stucco can,
Yeah,
more
there's-
uneven, more room for like,
Yeah.
dirt and things to get in the.
But you said there's a mix too, where they put.
So
some
so
ethos
this
on
is
the
a
outside.
textured stucco
Okay.
on that side.
And with no ethos behind it, because you said some have ethos behind it.
Yes, so those look just like, they look identical from the street. You can't tell the difference.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes even I have to knock on it to find out if what's what. So the ethos finishes are, yeah, so that's an ethos finish on there. So that could be, it's,
very smooth.
yeah.
So the smoother, the smaller the texture is probably likely ethos, or is that?
There is a sand finish stucco, which is just a stucco product. It's funny how words come into play. So
Yeah.
if you don't like multicolored stucco, it's blotchy. If you do like it, it's mottled. So if you want a mottled stucco, go that route. If you don't want a blotchy stucco, then go a different route, right? We run into that a lot. In New Jersey, we were doing float stucco houses, one after the other, because in their eyes, the ethos finish was fake. Real wood soffits, real wood fascias, real cement stucco, no painted stucco, no. Because basically the finishes are like paint. They are paint with sand and fibers and acrylics, and you still trowel them on like stucco, but they're basically paint.
What about sealants to try to be proactive?
All right, so sealants. When a house that already exists and you don't know what's back there, sealants can be helpful. If you've tested a house that's 20 years old and it's dry, some inspectors will tell you, hey, there's no sealants, caulk everything. I don't do that. If it's been field tested for 20 years and it's dry, there's no, you could spend a couple $1,000s to seal an entire home. That's one of those feel-good things I think too, is where you can say to your buyer, hey, the whole house has been freshly sealed. We've caulked everything. Yeah, that sounds great. Was it necessary? Probably not. We didn't have any water problems. In the newer houses, caulking should not be used as that one thing that keeps your house dry. It has a place in construction, but it's not that. It's in there for expansion and contraction. So your window gets heated up by the sun differently than the wall does. It can expand a little bit, providing you have a caulk joint, not just caulking. Because putting caulking right over top of stucco without a joint doesn't help much, and it probably hurts a little. So stucco's a sponge, right? So when the water hits that stucco, and you have let's just say we have a ½ inch of caulking around the window, right? Hits the stucco, it sucks in behind that caulking because it's a sponge. It wants to draw that water in. So now the sun comes up, hits the wall, dries the wall. The very last place to dry is whatever got behind the caulking. So, and if you were to put caulking across the top of the window, you've basically created a little trough for water to sit in. Normally it would like to go in and go out, but if you've caulked that, now it can't go out. So it takes even longer to dry. So I wouldn't seal it unless we had reason to seal it. So say we did an inspection, we found a lot of readings in the teens, maybe low 20s. All right, I think it's again, bang for your buck, right? I think it might be worthwhile to try caulking that home. See if we can get those readings to drop a little bit. Maybe they drop, maybe they don't. You know, kind of worth a shot. Other than that.
Surface ceiling on top of the stuff like that, there was some kind of like a elastic type of painting you could do.
Yeah, so elastomeric is a good product.
Stone, an imitation stone, anything like that.
Yes, that's a little bit of a different sealant. But so we'll go with the elastomerics. If you have stains and you have patches and you have a color that the homeowner doesn't like, elastomerics are great. You can go in there, you can put on 2 layers, two coats of that, and it'll cover and bridge all those cracks. In fact, it's the only way to really patch cracks in these systems, because most of the time we don't like the crack because we can see it. But if you ask somebody to patch this crack, you're going to see it 10 times worse. So with these coatings, they kind of bridge those cracks and you don't see them. So it definitely has a good, and by the way, if you're going to be doing that, then caulking is not bad as part of that process. Because now you're caulking a vinyl window to a waterproof paint, and it can actually function, rather than trying to caulk a sponge to a frying pan kind of thing, you know. Sealer for stone. If you think it's going to seal cracks, it does not do that. And cracks is usually where we think we have the water coming in. One good reason to seal stone veneer is because the stone veneer does age pretty quickly. It fades out. Sometimes the surface kind of pops off or wears off. So sealants for that purpose are good. If you're doing it because you think it's going to hold the water out of the home, not really. It doesn't help a lot with that. But to save the stone, a good reason to do it. You see a lot of like the Wawas and things where all the bottoms are stucco and stone is just falling apart because they keep throwing salt down there and salt's eating that away. So if they would have sealed all of that prior to doing that, it would have helped them out a lot. So it has a purpose, but again, nothing's going to beat proper flashings and proper vapor barriers of keeping everything.
What's the typical stucco inspection cost for somebody just getting inspections on a home? I mean, there's a range.
Yeah, there's a
How big
range.
the home is, but
Your typical house that has, let's just say, only a stucco and stone front, which a lot of housing developments have
one
that.
side of the house or something.
Yeah, they're like $650,
I mean, that's
something like that. If you're going to do a full house, it's usually around $1,200, maybe a little bit more. On the big fancy house, we've had inspections,
6
you know,
to 1,200,
close.
maybe 2,000 if you have an enormous giant.
Yeah, or even more on some of those.
Or more.
You look at the house and you can kind of tell. Some houses have one wall with only one window in it. Very easy for inspection purposes. Some that have, you know, one wall with
Low end
all
is like
windows.
600.
Yeah.
600 up, depending on, okay.
Yeah. Now, if you only have a very, maybe it's a brick front with a couple little stucco accents or stone veneer accents, that wouldn't be so much.
What as far as, to kind of play off of what he said, maintenance, like if there, you know, whether or not sealing is a thing, is there a typical maintenance for stucco that any homeowner, like if I have a client who buys a home with stucco, they have inspected, they don't, whatever it is, but like is there things they should do every year, every 5 years, every?
Honestly, if it's done right and flashings are good, there is no maintenance.
Okay.
If it's dirty, you want to wash it.
Well, yeah.
You know, but
Power
water's,
washing a good idea, or do you have to know what you're doing in order to power? Could you power wash the stucco right off of it? Because I could see somebody like doing something there.
all right,
You know, and then you
there
pour
there
it
is
in.
that possibility. It's unlikely. Like the textured stucco, the cement stucco, you won't take that off. Sometimes the EFIS finishes that are on the stucco, if there's any little, you know.
You should be mindful of what you're doing. Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And the other part of that is if you have somebody just kind of going out there and just blowing it apart, they may be blowing water up into the soffit. And again, back to being builders, right? The builder should have a vapor that goes all the way to the roof. Soffit goes on next. Any water blows in there, doesn't matter. It's on the vapor barrier, no big deal. We actually had a home that was on the first home in the development, and beyond that was just a big rolling cornfield. That wind blew the rain up that cornfield into their soffit and rotted out the entire wall. Not a single penetration in that wall. No windows, no anything. But it kept dumping into the soffits, and coming down. So it was, and you wouldn't think it because it's undercover, right? But it was rain going uphill rather than coming downhill.
Mother nature, you can't account for what might happen.
No, you can't account for everything.
Wind and water and. And
Yeah.
movies.
In fact, that wall wouldn't even have, it would have passed inspection had it not been shown up on the inside.
Mhm.
Because you just don't, you don't
So no
read that.
efficiency.
Yeah.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Years ago, I'm saying
When?
like 15 years ago, I don't even know what ever happened to this house. I never sold it. But I went there and I was coming down the steps. There was mold on the wall. And I'm like, is that mold on your wall? And the lady says, oh, I forgot to wipe that off today.
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 I'm like, today? Wait, what? She's like, oh yeah, well, it started over there, and now it's showing up over here. And I'm like, when did that start? She's like, oh, after we get this crack, but we got the crack fixed. There's a crack in the stucco on the face of the house. She said she got it fixed, but she had molded all, like, how do you fix that?
Yeah.
It sounds like there's mold in the walls.
Yeah, well, the crack wasn't the start of the problem. The water was the start of the problem, which made the
Right,
stucco
right,
crack
okay, gotcha, yeah.
because that all swelled up. So, although they fixed the crack, they never fixed the water problem. So we've had houses, we take the picture frames off the wall, all mold. It didn't grow on the painted drywall because it didn't have that darkness behind the picture frames.
That's
It-
a good test. Peek behind now whenever you're looking at that.
Yeah.
Peek behind the
Yeah.
picture frames.
But so, did that lady have to, like, take all her walls apart? Or, like, how do you-
When it gets to the inside like that, yeah, the drywall's got to go too now because that's all compromised. If the drywall's not compromised, then really it's just an exterior project. But when the drywall's,
How do you see mold on the wall? I mean, that's coming through the wall.
well, the dampness came through the wall.
Got it.
Drywall's not waterproof in any manner.
Yeah.
That's why you don't use it outside. So if that drywall's getting wet, it very easily sucks that moisture through to the inside. And then, you know, she's had mold just growing in the house where it wasn't even behind anything. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Didn't you smell it in that house? See, I'd have smelled it.
I mean,
It had to be a
I
lot
smell it.
worse inside.
I'm highly allergic to it, so I smell it. I walk into houses and, like, sometimes I'm walking around the house and I'm like, where is the mold? It's because I can smell it.
Yep.
But I don't see anything anywhere. I just
Yep.
know it's there. So it must be in the wall then somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure if you look at the outside, you could find that entrance point.
Interesting. I never could figure out why. Like, literally, once I walked into a house, and it was a huge house, and I walked right through the door, and I said, you guys, this house has mold, and I don't know where it is, but I can smell it. We went to the basement, and it was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you run into any specific builders where you notice, all the problems that you maybe you encounter a certain number of problems and keep hearing this builder's name. That's who built your house. That's like.
Yeah.
Do you notice any patterns?
Not so much here in the Lehigh Valley.
I mean, I go everywhere in PA. We're not everywhere in the Eastern Third.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just curious all over.
Down south, there are quite a few builders down there that have gotten that bad rap, and some of them actually tried. They really tried to fight the good fight for their clients. It was just so massive they just can't take apart every house. There's not enough money to do that. So even though
No
they
particular builder stands out as to be weird.
yeah, well,
Okay, if you don't want to answer
so
that,
Toll
that's
Brothers,
weird.
Toll Brothers had a lot of issues, right?
Yeah.
And they said, okay, we're not going to do stucco anymore, but they still do stone veneer, so they're still doing stucco, right? And again, they kicked the stucco out mainly because of perception.
Yeah.
Because again, if the flashings are right, the stucco's fine.
I could see
Wall's
that. I had
fine.
a perception too from again living in a hot weather climate versus
Yep.
and living here back and forth. It's
Yep.
definitely the perception.
Yeah, there's a few of them I can't think of at the moment that are down south that
On the
are.
flip side, are there any that you're like, that's a solid, appears to be a solid builder? Every house I've ever done an inspection for, and it was one of these, like they're always good. Like
You know what's
something
different
like
about the
that?
Lehigh Valley? We don't really have those huge development builders up here. Small development builders. Signature Homes they had little developments here and there, and Stucco had at one point, and they were a really good builder. They don't do it like that anymore. Irwin Forrest is a real good builder, but these guys are like single home builders, and there's a big difference between that. You have a guy who,
Care that goes into it.
yeah, like Stucco was one where he had a crew of guys that were always there. So, say the stucco company would come in and start working, and something wasn't right. you can say to the Stucco guys, you need to fix that so we can move on. What happens if they're not there? The guys aren't going home for the day.
Yeah.
They need to make money, to feed the family, right? They're going to, whatever the problem is, we'll keep on going, because it hurts them to stop or leave. A lot of the stone veneer companies use foreigners, and the foreigners work by the square foot. The only way they make money is to hustle their butts off as fast as they can, and they can make really good money doing that if they really, really move. But they can't.
I feel like that's I was gonna say, I think that's everywhere. I was gonna say it's,
Yeah.
We had the home that we had built in Arizona. I mean, this is two decades ago now, probably now. They go so fast. I was gonna say, I remember taping things off when they were building it and found out like a spigot, one of the things through the pop out of the window, like through the windowsill, and like you find all kinds of things like that.
Yep.
Like, oh yeah, we're sure the look on your face. And it's everywhere. It's depends on the workers, I guess. You speed
Yeah,
through it.
it's tough. Even the best of builders are not going to get everything right. They're just not. One thing about the labor market out there that I feel every day is you can get manpower. You cannot get the right manpower. We've had literally hundreds of guys come through the company, and once they've been taught, they let them go up to the union because the union can afford to pay them. We actually pay about the same, but they have a crazy benefit package that you can't match out in the private sector. So then you get somebody else and train them for a couple of years, and then they go. So.
We understand the problem in real estate.
Yeah.
Happens to us too.
Trying to get all that is tough.
Well, out of respect of everyone's time, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up, although Bill will be here to answer questions for a little while. Bill, thank you very much for coming out.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Give me cards.
I
And thank you
actually
to everybody for coming out.
I have a couple cards, but I
We
also
hope to see you
have.
next month. We will have one of our underwriters here,
Yep.
an attorney going over estates. So it'll be another good one. So, but Bill, thanks for kicking the year off right. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Bill.
To learn it.